Does she want to do jazz and Cedar Park? We're having vendors this year. Classic dad. Yeah. Cool. I'll send you the application.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Cedar Falls on Monday, July 1st, 2024. I will now call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz.
Here.
Latta.
Here.
Cruz. Hawbaker.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Chrisman.
Here.
Dunn. Oh. Cruz and Dunn absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we will now move to cash management report with from Lisa Roding. And then also, just so everyone knows, we will be looking for a motion to recommend approval on these items after presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council, Mayor, City staff, and the public. Tonight, we will be reviewing the cash management report, and this is for fiscal year 2025.
I can see and hear.
Make sure to mute your mic, Daryl, if you get a chance.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
I'll review why we review this annually. I'll review the investments and rates of return. I'll review the operating cash and provide a snapshot of the financial position, and I'll review the capital expenditures. Having set policies in place to review this cash management actually helps us ensure that we have financial stability, and performing this annual financial analysis gives us valuable information on the current and the future state of our city finances. Why do we review the cash management? The city's cash position is generally tends to increase with expansions, or it will decrease with recessions. It is also affected by policy and legislative changes, emergencies, and natural disasters. Forecasted cash balances are based on historical seasonal patterns, budget plans, projected economic and other fiscally relevant conditions. It is when the cash flow deviates from this that we can see something is trending and we want to be ahead of this. During the cash management review, we do look at the projected cash receipts, the anticipated cash disbursements, and during this process, we should consider all funds in this cash management review, but this report does contain only 9 of the major funds. We must consider the timing of the current receipts and disbursements, and we want to ensure that our cash and reserves are available when we need it. The city's short-term excess funds are pooled together in 4 accounts, a checking account and 3 liquid money market accounts. For these 4 funds, over the past 11 months for this fiscal year, we have been able to generate over $568,000 in interest. And we do invest in certificates of deposits. Those have averaged a rate of return this past fiscal year of 5.29%, and that's up from the 4.12% in fiscal year 2023. The interest rates have remained pretty steady over the last 12 months. To gauge our investment strategy, we look at what are our cash flow needs. How much do we need for general operating? We have to invest in accordance with Iowa statutes, federal regulations, and the city's investment policy. The full investment policy is found in the Administrative Policy Book in CFD number 1008. And during our investment process, we want to make sure we monitor the current market conditions. As city staff, we want to manage our public resources very carefully. There are three primary objectives with regards to that. We want to make sure we are protecting the principal that we invest. Are we going to get that money back? We want to optimize our earnings, and we want to be able to provide liquidity to cover our ongoing and unexpected cash needs. Now, of these three principles, the protection of the principal and the liquidity is more important than actually receiving a higher rate of return. So we want to be very careful with those funds. Cash reserves are an important tool in our long-term financial planning and sustainability of the city. There are three principles that we follow in holding cash reserves. First, we want to be able to meet our ongoing operational costs. We want to be able to pay the employees and pay our vendors for materials. Since the largest amount of property taxes are received in October and April, we use our cash reserves to fund those months in between. The second reason for having cash reserves is we want to protect against uncertainties. We have natural disasters such as floods, ice storms, windstorms, pandemics. We have man-made disasters such as a cyber attack, chemical or oil spills. The cash reserves actually provide the assistance during these events. And if we do receive federal and state funding, those reimbursements are usually down the road and can take up to 18 months to receive those reimbursements. Not all natural disasters are declared, and funding is not always available, so we fund those 100% with city resources. Cash reserves also help during recessions or the downturn in the economy. We have to watch state legislation in case there's any takeaways. The third reason for cash reserves is it is one piece of our bond equation. The city received an upgrade to their bond rating in 2020 to a AAA rating, and this was contributed due to our strong performance in our cash reserves. Cash reserves provide an assurance to those creditors that the local government is not at risk for default. But how much cash reserves are enough? We need to make sure we're meeting our regular operational costs. We need to have money on hand for additional transaction costs. Inflation rates have been up in the past 2 years or longer, but the CIP for calendar year 2023 was at 4.14%, and that's down from calendar year 2022 at 8.01%. We want to be able to have reserves available for future opportunities, such as matching funds for grants. We have to be careful of those unfunded mandates, potential legislative changes that may affect our revenue sources. And we also want to be able to project for future capital project planning. Fund balance are reviewed annually at the end of our audit period, and that will take place here in late August, early September. We will reserve the necessary funds for our cash reserves. It is the city's position to maintain the general fund balance between 15 and 25%. In 2023, council directed staff to move towards the upper end of that percent at 20 to 25%. Now, having a range does accommodate different risk levels, whether it's a compromise between elected officials, or the range actually supports the management of reserves. The range also includes that minimum, and it includes a maximum. And at that maximum level, that's when you decide, do those resources then go towards another purpose? City also has reserves in place for these funds directed by council, between 20 and 30% for refuse fund, 65 to 75% of sewer fund, 20 to 30% for street fund, 10 to 20% for stormwater fund, and the emergency reserves are held between $1.5 million and $2 million. Again, this is set by policy to be able to have operating requirements met, emergency planning, and also this helps with our bond rating. This slide here shows a projected total balance for fiscal year 2025. Cash generally comes in and goes out in a very familiar cycle, year after year, since many of the payments are predetermined. Owners of properties in the city will pay their property taxes semi-annually, paying those in March and September, so the city receives those funds in October and April, noted on the slide. At the end of the year, we have some primary expenditures, such as our debt service payment, end of the year capital projects, and the startup of capital or construction season. But the majority of the revenues do come from property taxes. We do receive some state shared revenues, such as road use tax, local option sales tax, but those are used for capital purchases or capital spending. We compare ourselves to other states. The state of Iowa has fewer state shared revenues. Therefore, the city of Cedar Falls is reliant on property tax revenue. The revenues are in support of general operating, day-to-day operations. Capital expenditures are made in accordance with our multi-year capital improvements plan. There is a schedule of those expenditures in the report found on pages 50 through 54. Management makes a concerted effort to limit those capital purchases to the months where revenues are high, the October and the April timeframe when we receive those larger property tax payments. Departments do adhere to a schedule unless there is an emergency, and the departments have had some supply chain issues the last 12 to 18 months where we may move capital expenditures from one year to the next. As part of the capital expenditure program, we do have a vehicle maintenance program. It's the 34th year for that. The departments will create this schedule, update it as needed, and they have used this to actually extend the useful life of the vehicles longer. Management will review their vehicles and get them on the schedule when they are close to failing. They will try to make these purchases late in the fiscal year. The goal of the cash management report is to provide valuable information regarding the past, present, and future state of the city's investments, cash reserves, and the capital improvements expenditures. We will want to keep an eye on our cash reserves. The reserves will help the city manage the risk in making available resources for unplanned, unavoidable expenditures and possible revenue interruptions. A reminder that the commercial rollback, the state actually has some state backfill funds in there, but that will be phased out by 2029. We will want to monitor the local economic conditions. We will want to watch the inflation rate and how it affects the city, and monitor any supply chain disruptions in the future. We will also want to monitor any future state legislative actions and how that may affect property taxes. So tonight, I'm seeking a motion for recommending the approval of this fiscal year 2025 cash management report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Open it up to council for questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
First, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to our entire financial team for always taking the time to explain this to us. This is definitely not in my wheelhouse personally, so I appreciate that you take the time to put this together. From everything that I've seen, I think this management report looks good, and so I would recommend approval.
Motion?
A motion to recommend approval.
Second. Motion second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
Lisa, thank you for the report. It's great as always. I noticed one of our checking account or savings accounts with Wells Fargo had a very, very low interest rate. I'm assuming, are we phasing out of that one, or what's the situation there?
We keep the 3 money markets to be able to put our funds in the various institutions. We do have depository limits with all of the financial institutions that are on our investment schedule. And when the interest rates were very low, we could not hold all of our property taxes in our general checking account. So we did have to open up those money markets in order to have those funds spread out against institutions. But yes, I am aware that we really don't want to have a whole bucket of money with that one institution. We try to use the other 2, or again, we try to use the certificates of deposits for investments.
Okay, would there be other institutions that we could maybe get a bid from or an offer from for a better money market rate than what was shown there?
Yes, we could possibly do that. Right now, we have very few funds in either of those 3 institutions, so since the rates have gone up.
Another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another question, if I may. Lisa, do you know offhand, when we went up to the AAA bond rating, did that affect our cost of borrowing? And if so, like when we issued bonds, did we get a lower rate of any significance?
I will have to defer to Director Rodenbeck on that.
Yes, we did get better rates. I think at the time, though, the last bonds we sold there were in 2022. And in 20 and 22, the rates we were getting were pretty low anyway, just because of the market at the time. So I think what will be interesting is now in 2024, when we go to sell bonds and rates are higher, I would assume that gap between being a AAA versus something else will be larger.
Okay, a follow-up on that then. Do you know offhand how much money we have to tie up in our reserves to qualify for the higher rating? And the reason I ask that is because if we have to tie up, several million and we get maybe 10 basis points or some minimal amount, it may not be worth it. But would be curious now that we got a potential bigger spread in the interest rate environment.
For general obligation bonds, there isn't a certain percentage. If you read like the Moody's reports in the past, they'll just say strong cash reserves, but they don't say like 30% cash reserves. They just say strong cash reserves. Now, when we go to sell revenue bonds, if they're, let's say, sewer bonds that are 100% backed by sewer funds, we do have to have a certain ratio. I think it's like 125% of our operating costs to have a certain rating on those sewer bonds. So it kind of depends if they're revenue or general obligation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Any other questions, comments from council? So we're looking for a motion to approve. Any questions and comments from the public? Yeah. Name and city, please.
Betcha. All right, Rick Sharp, Cedar Falls. So Councilmember Cruz brought up the part about the cover letter with the low money market rates, especially with Wells Fargo. I mean, heck, give me the money, I'll get you a better return on that investment. But my question is, why aren't we working with our local banks here like Veridian, Cedar Falls Community Credit Union? They also offer very good rates. I also know those two entities are actually big participants with the city when it comes to Sturgis Falls and other activities. Collins Community Credit Union, they're Cedar Rapids based. You know, why aren't we supporting our local businesses in that regard? Going through the whole document there, I don't know exactly what pages they're on, but there's a projected parking balance, either page 23 or 42, however you look at the slide. It states that the monthly balances declined during the year due to the suspending paid parking in the parking lots, and the city will need to continue monitoring funds and determine when property tax dollars may be needed to subsidize the fund. My question is, why are we using property tax dollars for this? This should be a user fee. The citizens don't benefit from it, the businesses benefit from the parking. If the fund drops where we have to subsidize it with taxpayer money, I would recommend that we use the TIF district money, the Community Main Street TIF district, because that's where most of the paid parking's at. Page 46 or 65, however you want to look at it, it's called the excess pension fund. I see that we had 2 CD accounts, one's police, one's fire. Same interest rates, same maturity dates. The police fund generates more interest due to more money in the CD. So are there plans to, because there's one that's going to expire in 24. As one fire CD expires, are there plans to roll it into the police CD fund because we no longer have separate police and fire? And by doing that, looking at the interest rates that was in the manual, we could generate an additional $20,000 in interest over the 3 years. And then page 6584, again, vehicle replacement fund. Again, I know it's a goal to stretch the life out of these vehicles. But if we know the vehicle costs are going up, why not purchase more when they're cheaper? So for example, again, in the documents that were provided, in FY24, a new police Interceptor SUV costs, according to lines, I guess, $46,000, and we bought 3. And then we're going to buy 3 more in FY25 at a cost of $65,000. If we know we're going to replace these vehicles, why not just add the 3 on and save us $60,000 a year on that? So any answers would help me out. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Any other public discussion for this evening on this item? All right, Lisa, did you have something else?
No, I had a few answers.
Okay, yeah, if you want to jump ahead, go ahead.
Okay. With regards to the local banks, we do have 18 institutions that we work with. That includes IPATE, the Iowa Public Investment Trust. So when we do the depository resolution, yes, we have to list the home of where the institution is from. So yes, Collins Community Credit Union would be out of the Cedar Rapids area. But we do have investments with other institutions. A lot of the CDs would be with other banks. Again, Councilman Cruz asked about money market with other institutions. We could research that and see if any other institutions are available. The parking fund, yes, that balance is declining. I guess I will ask if Director Rodenbeck has some more information on that. I know the parking study is going on, so.
Sure. So I think you heard the presentation 2 weeks ago about parking. I don't think that's any secret that the parking fund is operating at a deficit. Have we started using property taxes yet to supplement? No, we're not quite there, but we kind of wanted to show that that is what's going to happen if it continues, even the current structure. So that's where we're at with parking. Hey, Lisa, just so I don't forget on your first one, you might want to just mention that every month you send out that bid, to the various institutions.
Oh, yes. Yes, so monthly, tail end of the month, we always have a monthly investment, either $4 or $8 million worth of CDs, and it does go out to those 18 institutions. And I'm trying to think how many we got back on Friday. Maybe 6 of the 18 actually bid and gave us rates. So we do go with the highest rate of return on those investment requests. The excess pension funds, we do keep those two separate. I'm not sure if there's some guidance from prior when they were still two divisions and where those funds came from for
Sure.
splitting.
So those funds were way back, well, even before '96, about when Iowa created the state pension fund. These were the monies that Cedar Falls had that we did not have to give to the state. So we keep those for investments, and then we use the interest every year to help offset pension costs in fire and police. So you'll see in the budget, we often talk about, and we still had a levy for so much for the 411 pension, because that was above interest. You know, as Mr. Sharp pointed out, we really have, for both police and fire, it's really one CD. I mean, I want to say they're both the exact same rate because we're investing them together, but then we show them separately as fire and police, and we show that interest income off of those in the budget to offset the costs in police and fire. And even though we have public safety, we still budget for those separately. We have a police budget and a fire budget. So the nice thing about keeping these separate is that interest offsets those costs. And so when we do that pie chart, you know, you guys kind of always remember the pie chart where it shows, okay, what piece of the pie is for police, what piece is for the library, what piece is the fire. We like to keep them separate so we can show that offsetting revenue to show what the true property tax cost is for some of those operations.
Okay.
Now, the vehicle maintenance, that would be up to Public Works on how they get those vehicle bids, where they can find the vehicles at. But I know that the true 46,000 for this fiscal year is only for the vehicles for those interceptors, and the actual upfitting of those 3 vehicles will not happen until this fall timeframe, from what I understand from Dustin Rowden, the vehicle maintenance supervisor. But again, I think that's, you know, some supply chain issues if they can get that many vehicles. But they do try to limit that vehicle maintenance or replacement schedule to a certain dollar value that's in the capital improvements plan. And I don't have that total value off the top of my head, but I know there's a value in that that we try to limit it to.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Gil.
So it's probably one of those things where if Mr. Birdie said, hey, we need 3, but I'm going to ask for 6, the council's going to go, no. Even though it's a good idea, to Mr. Sharp's point, we don't have that information that's going to say it's a great deal to buy all 6 now and have that, let's do what we have to do to be within our budget. And then next year, we'll have to do what we have to do to be within our budget.
Correct. And they, you know, look at those vehicles, decide when they need to be replaced, and schedule them out that way.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. Have we set a time where we're going to be pursuing issuing the bonds in light of interest rates trickling down ever so slowly? I know there was a hiccup in the Federal Reserve's expectations of, you know, how many rate cuts there's going to be. Kind of curious where we're at with that. Is there a drop dead point where we need to be selling bonds, or where are we at?
So actually, Lisa and Ron and myself have had some conversations with our financial advisor, because I think, just like you know, Mr. Cruz, is that we maybe originally were planning on selling them in the spring, but we thought maybe we should wait a little bit. So we had then kind of looked at a potential July sale and thought, well, again, maybe we just want to wait a little bit. So right now, we're kind of in a process or a schedule where we're looking at selling them. I think it was around in September. And some of that was also kind of planning around that last quarterly Federal Reserve meeting, when we think that might be. But one of the things that we are trying to do is, as you know, we coordinate our bond sales with Cedar Falls Utility. So we tend to sell in the even years. And so I think our only limitation is we probably still need to get something done before the end of the calendar year, but we are trying to wait as late as possible. But it's like anything. You also need a few meetings to get that done. You can't just do it all in one meeting. You got to have a hearing and publish and all that stuff. So that's why we're kind of shooting for the fall to try to do that.
Okay, thanks. One other quick question then. If you could visit with the bond underwriters, what amount of, how many basis points difference from the AA to AAA there really would be? What kind of significance are there? And, it adds up when you get multiple millions. So I'd be curious when that happens, if you could have them explain to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. Any other discussion from council? Not. We have a motion and a second, and just check, Kevin, for this. Is this just a voice vote? Yes. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion does carry. Move on to item number 2, proposed health plan amendments. We got a presentation from Bailey Schindel. Quick updates. You do have in front of you a printed copy of this. There is on the, let me look at the actual page number. There's one spot highlighted in yellow that we did make a minor change from what was in the packet, just to add at age 65, which is a clarification for a technicality on Medicare eligibility. And so otherwise, I'll let Bailey take it away and explain the bulk of this. Thank you, Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So if you recall, at the last few council meetings, there's been discussion regarding the city's health insurance and the allowance of continuation coverage, specifically if there is a duty-related death. The purpose of this presentation is to inform of the city's current policies, the potential revisions as proposed by the mayor for consideration, and to answer any questions. The city's current summary plan description, or SPD, allows for the continuation of existing group health coverage for dependents of an eligible peace officer or firefighter to which a line of duty death benefit is payable pursuant to Code Section 411.6, subsection 15. The proposed revision would be to add to the SPD the following language: to which an accidental death benefit is payable pursuant to Code Section 411.6, subsection 9. If approved, this revision would allow the dependents of an eligible peace officer or firefighter who received an accidental death benefit to now remain on the group health plan and continue coverage. Here you see the exact language and revisions to the SPD itself regarding continuation coverage for dependents of an eligible peace officer or firefighter. Instead of the reference to only line of duty in the title, the proposed revision would now be duty related. This would allow coverage continuation for both line of duty and accidental death benefits. Iowa Code Section 509A 13C requires the continuation of existing group health coverage for dependents of an eligible peace officer or firefighter to which a line of duty death benefit is payable. In the middle there, you will see a proposed revision to our SPD to also allow the continuation of existing group health coverage for dependents of a peace officer or firefighter who's an active service member at the time of death to which an accidental death benefit is payable, pursuant to Code Section 411.6, subsection 9. And then there's a few other references in the section that also add the proposed accidental death language in addition to the current line of duty death benefit. City staff has sent the proposed revisions that you see here to add coverage continuation in the case of accidental death benefits to Wellmark for their consideration for approval. Wellmark has approved the proposed revisions and confirmed that these revisions would be covered by stop-loss insurance. They agreed to this since the request was so specific and it only affects such a small number of individuals. Typically, Wellmark did advise that any off-the-cuff exceptions may not be approved by Wellmark and may not be covered by stop-loss. But again, since this request was so specific and only affected a small number of individuals, they did allow for it to be approved and covered under stop-loss. The proposed revisions to the SPD regarding the continuation of coverage for dependents for peace officers and firefighters to which an accidental death benefit is payable would be retroactive back to February 1st, 2024, if approved. Again, to clarify, this benefit is only for active peace and firefighters. Also, as you consider this proposed revision, know that it's hard to compare to other cities or entities because each one will have their own unique policies, benefits, and health plans. Regarding the cost for continuation coverage for dependents of eligible peace officers or firefighters, the SPD currently states that City Council is not required to pay for the cost of the coverage for their surviving spouse and children, but may choose to pay a cost or a portion of the cost for the coverage. The proposed revision is a revision to Personnel Policy 2251, which is related to insurance benefits, and it clarifies the cost of coverage for the surviving spouse and children of an eligible peace officer or firefighter. Here you see the revision to that Personnel Policy 2251, insurance benefits, and I'm sorry if it's hard to read, but I will summarize. So on the left at the top, we added some clarification language on our retiree process for insurance benefits. Those were already in place or in practice, but we just clarified it in our policy here. On the left at the bottom, section 9A, is the verbatim language of the proposed revisions to the SPD regarding adding the accidental death benefit as eligible for continuation coverage for dependents of an eligible peace officer or firefighter. 9A, so on the top right-hand side, explains how to request coverage continuation for eligible peace officers and firefighters, and also clarifies the length of coverage through the dependents as being through the dependent's death upon Medicare eligibility, dependent child reaching age 26, and if coverage is ended voluntarily by dependents. In front of you, like the mayor mentioned, you do have a hard copy with that one small revision to section 9A1. So Medicare eligibility was revised to Medicare eligibility at age 65. So just those three small words were added as a clarification. If coverage ends or is initially not taken in the first place, dependents are not allowed to enroll back into the plan in the future. Wellmark has also approved this language as to how to request and the length of continuation coverage for dependents of eligible peace officers or firefighters, and assured us that this coverage is covered by stop-loss. 9A2 clarifies the cost for continuation coverage for dependents of eligible peace officers and firefighters. If you recall, the SPD stated that the city is not required to pay for continuation coverage, but may choose to. The proposed cost for this continuation coverage is at the employee rate, whether that is single or family, whichever is applicable, for the first 36 months of coverage. Then the full cost will shift to the dependent or dependents after the 36 months is up, and then at that point the city would be responsible for $0 of that. 9A3, the bottom paragraph on the right, explains how payments for continuation coverage would be handled which is how we handle payment for retiree coverage as well. The city also looked at our insurance policy in regards to the death of any employee. Our current SPD policy and typical insurance practice is that coverage would end at the end of the month following the death. The proposed SPD revision you see here essentially allows for 1 additional month of coverage for any employee death. So it would be the coverage would end at the end of the month following the month in which the death happened. So for example, let's say a death would occur today, July 1st. Our current policy would state that insurance ends on July 31st. The new proposed revision would now have coverage through August 31st, so 1 extra month. Wellmark also has agreed to this SPD revision and assured us that it would be covered under stop loss due to the specific ask and the small number of people that it would affect. And you'll see these items again later in the actual, it'll be 3 items in the actual council meeting. And with that, I'll take any questions.
So just quick clarifications from my end. So we're not looking for any motion or anything right now. It's just more for questions. If you have any thoughts on the revisions to the policy, and then we'll move to the actual discussion for voting on the actual agenda. But for now, just wanted to give everyone time to be able to review everything and ask Bailey any questions if you have any clarifications. I'll open up for council discussion.
Yep. Mr. Mayor? Okay. One of the proposed changes then, as I understand it, relative to our policy or the SPD, in the information that we've provided, we have the 5 pages related to insurance benefits. Okay. Subsection 9, the new one, is a specific carve-out just for police and fire, right? Everything else applies to any city employee, right?
Correct. So, and before what we had to offer, 411.6 subsection 15, that was a carve out for police and fire as well. But we were only required to pay for that if it's a line of duty death, according to 411, what they consider that. This would just add for that extra section of covering the accidental death benefit as well, so for public safety.
As a follow-up to that then, as I understand it, 411.6.9, which is the accidental death, versus 15, which is the line of duty. 406.9, first of all, this covers an eligible peace officer or firefighter, and then you're eligible if it's deemed to have been a qualifying death under 411.6.9, correct?
Correct.
Who makes that determination?
It would be 411 or MFPRSI. They would make that decision, the state would. It's not the city of Cedar Falls. We go by the decision that the state makes on the death benefit that they're eligible for.
And as I understand that particular section of 411.6, it initially requires a referral from the chief of police or chief of fire from the municipality.
If they would reach out to us, we would answer any questions, but they typically make that decision, I believe, off the death certificate that needs to be provided to them, and they make that decision off of that information.
Okay.
And then we had discussed, separate of this policy, we will likely look at in future years. This is something we want to apply to all staff, anyone that dies in the line of duty. But so for this, it is really just looking at that specific scope of the first responders of police and fire as covered by the state policy.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Bailey, can I clarify in 9A, talks about continuation of existing coverage or re-enrollment in previously existing coverage. So that's just when we're doing annual enrollment year over year, it's just a continuation thereof, or?
So the re-enrollment would actually refer to if there's not enough information at the beginning where we don't think this is duty related at all, the city just assumes it wasn't related, maybe the family thought it wasn't related, but if it would come back being deemed by 411 to be duty related, we would then allow them to re-enroll in that coverage once we have that decision of 411.
And do you have a sense of how often that may occur, that there would be that type of a delay? I truly just don't know, so.
And I don't, but it is there, and that's part of the state code too for how 411.6 subsection 15, which we're already required to do, that's part of that code as well.
Sure. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor? Bailey, do you have any idea how many people this has applied to historically that would have been covered that were not?
I might defer that to maybe Jennifer Rodenbeck, just that I haven't been here very long to know those details.
I think from an active employee standpoint, I don't know that we would have had this apply. Can you think of anyone, Director Birdie?
I don't believe so. You know, I know on the police side, the only line of duty death we have was back in World War II, Everett Dutcher. The fire side, there was a firefighter who died in his sleep in the 90s. And those are the only two I can think of in my 35 years.
Thank you.
And most recently, Captain Brad Sherwood is the one that this would qualify for an active one that's currently on the table. Any other questions, discussion from council?
I can, Mr. Mayor, just
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah.
Now, when you say Wells Fargo says they're willing to cover, what's
Wellmark.
or Wellmark? What? Yeah, we were talking about the banking before. What are they covering?
So they're just guaranteeing that it would be covered by our stop loss, our reinsurance
Right,
agreement that we have in place.
because we're self-insured and that's our safety net, right?
Correct.
And
Yep,
so-
anything over that amount, they're agreeing that this would be covered. They would pick up any amounts. If it would happen to get to that amount, they would agree to pay for that,
And that's for the spouse and any dependents that they might have as well.
as long as they're eligible under these provisions.
Right, and, okay. And has there been any assessment on what let's say if you take an example of a particular case, if another event happened 10 years from now, do we know how much the city would be on the hook for? Ballpark?
I don't. Just looking at our stop loss in the past, we very rarely have people get to that amount, maybe 2 or 3 a year.
Right, I understand the stop loss, but we're on the hook, right?
Right.
For the cost up to the stop loss, right?
Right.
Correct.
The first 110,000.
Yeah.
First 110,000.
Right. So the maximum each year that it could be is 110,000 per person. So if there was a spouse and 2 dependents, it could be 110,000 for each,
Right.
as long as they're on the plan.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you, Bailey. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we will close the committee meeting, and we will take how's everyone feeling?
5 minutes?
5-minute break? Enough for everyone? We'll take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll be back here at 7:10 for the regular city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.